Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, you are kindly requested to keep your mobile phones on silent mode or switch them off. You can take it in 20 seconds, please. Thank you very much indeed for your cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. His Excellency Dr. Jamal Sanad Suwaidi, Director General of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, ECSSR, welcomes this distinguished gathering, and we are proud to present this lecture entitled The Coming North American Decades. And this lecture is part of the series of lectures hosted by the center, hosting VIPs and outstanding speakers in the field of defense security as part of our own celebration of the 20th anniversary of its own establishment. Ladies and gentlemen, the whole world witnesses dramatic transformation supported by economic, technological, and media changes, all of which contributed to the creation of a new geopolitical map and the introduction of new players who will have an important role. And this would raise so many questions about these changes and transformations on the roles of the usual players like the United States, especially in the Middle East, and what is the future of this region in the light of these political changes and transformations. Are the international superpowers still interested in the Middle East, or is there any change in their interest to other regions? I have the pleasure on your own behalf to welcome General David H. Petraeus, who will present his own lecture, a new lecture on the coming North American decades. General David Petraeus is the chairman of the KKR Global Institute and a visiting professor of public policy at the City University of New York, Macaulay Honors College, a Judge Wendy Professor at the University of Southern California, and a senior fellow at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. And His Excellency is a member of the advisory boards of several veterans organizations, and General Petraeus previously served 37 years in the U.S. military, including the commander of the coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, as the commander of the U.S. Central Command. And following retirement from the military in August 2011, he served for 14 months as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. General Petraeus also was the commander of the 101 Airborne Division in Baghdad, and then he returned to Baghdad to lead the surge operations in order to lead that decision within 19 months of his leadership of the multi-national security transition command, where violence was reduced by 90% and the Iraqi forces were reformed and expanded, and transition of tasks to Iraqi forces was commenced. After returning from Iraq in the fall of 2008, General Petraeus took command of the U.S. Central Command, overseeing all the operations of the U.S. forces in the Middle East, Central and South Asia. In the early July 2010, General Petraeus deployed again, and this time to command the NATO International Security Assistance Force and the U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And during the subsequent year, the momentum of Taliban was halted, the development of the Afghan security forces was accelerated, and transition of tasks to Afghan forces began. And following retirement from the military, General Petraeus served as director of the CIA, leading the agency during a period that saw significant achievements in the global counter-terrorism effort and initiation of comprehensive strategic plan to guide the agency conduct of an effort to increase worldwide human intelligence coverage, establishment of agency's economic security center, and the commencement of a number of initiatives to increase the agency's investments in its human capital. General Petraeus has received numerous U.S. military, State Department, NATO and United Nations awards and medals, and he has also been recognized by 14 or 13 foreign nations on your own behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite General Petraeus to give his lecture entitled The Coming North American Decades. Please, sir, the floor is yours. We have the honor to ask you to give your presentation. Thank you, sir.
Shukran jazilan, Masal here. It is great to be with you all. It's wonderful to be back in Abu Dhabi, and an honor to be able to say a few words this evening. Indeed, it's really a pleasure to be back in this great country, in this extraordinary emirate, and to have an opportunity to speak at this exceptional center, which has earned such an impressive reputation during its first 2 decades. And I want to congratulate Dr. Jamal al-Suwaidi and all the members of the center on its 20th anniversary and on all that the center has accomplished. Mabruk, Doctor. Well done to you all, and we applaud you all. It's a pleasure to see here this evening with us some longtime comrades, friends, members of the diplomatic community. I want to single out the U.S. Ambassador, Michael Corbin, a comrade from Iraq before he took this post on, and a great partner here, I know, for you, as well as for the different organizations with which I've been privileged to serve. I know the Brazilian, Singaporean, and Albanian ambassadors are here, and we're grateful for that, as is the Dean of the New York University of Dubai, a symbol, if you will, of the many academic initiatives that have been pursued in the UAE. The Commandant of the National Defense College is with us, I believe, the President of Khalifa University. We're grateful to each of you. And I'd like to ask the Brigadier to stand up, who I met with earlier this evening, a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College right there. You can be very proud of him. He was a young colonel or so some 8 years ago when I was privileged to be the Commandant of the Command and General Staff College, and he was one of the standout students that we had in the international contingent. And if Colonel Andy Milani is here, retired U.S. Army Colonel Andy Milani, do I see you anywhere, Andy? Thank you. Please look at Andy. Andy is yet another symbol of the partnerships between our countries. He and I chased war criminals and terrorists together for a great year in the Balkans. He then went on to command our most special of the special operations aviation forces in the United States. And since then, he has been out here helping to develop these superb forces that the United Arab Emirates has, a number of which I was privileged to have in the command when I was the commander of the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. And all Emiratis can be very, very proud of their men and women in uniform, particularly those who have deployed and served in combat. Up front, additionally, let me note that the many friends of the United Arab Emirates and the United States join me in repeating the sentiment that I conveyed several days ago to Ambassador Yusuf Al-Otaiba, the UAE's exceptional ambassador to the United States. And that was that the president, your president, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a speedy return to full duty was our wish for him. He and his family are in our prayers, as I know they are in all of yours as well. Well, I've been asked to speak this evening about a development that has been a surprise to many around the globe, that the world is on the threshold of what might be called the North American decades. This development is founded on a number of factors, and it comes at a time when the expectation was that we would instead have already embarked on the Asian century. That is not the case, at least not yet, though clearly the growth of China in particular has been extraordinary and is likely to continue to be impressive, albeit at lower levels than has been the case in the past decade. I'll speak about the new North American decades for some 15 or 20 minutes, and then I look forward to taking questions on this subject and having further conversation with our host. In fact, the questions can include anything: Iraq, the perceptions of the United States in the Gulf region, Syria, Egypt, or any others. Before beginning, I do want to just recall, as you did, thankfully, that before I spent those 37 years in uniform and served as the director of the CIA, I was actually a professor for a period of time. I taught economics and international relations after earning a PhD at Princeton, and now I'm putting those skills to use again in that position as the chairman of the KKR Global Institute, as a professor at the Honors College of the City University of New York, where I should note that I lead a seminar that is titled, appropriately, The Coming North American Decades. I'm also a senior fellow at Harvard, as you noted, where I lead a task force on North America. I hold a chair at the University of Southern California, where my areas of interest include the 4 revolutions about which I will speak tonight, which are the foundation of the North American Decades thesis. And I am the co-chairman with former World Bank President Bob Zoellick of the Council on Foreign Relations Task Force on North America as well. And in that latter capacity, in the past 3 weeks alone, he and I spent time in Canada and in Mexico, where we met with the leaders of each country and their key ministers, and I'd be happy to have questions on those visits as well. Well, with that, let me begin by observing that the first decade or so of the 21st century was not a kind one for the United States. As you all well know, it featured the worst terrorist attack in history, one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history, Hurricane Katrina, the worst financial downturn since the Great Depression, 2 divisive and costly wars abroad, and polarized, dysfunctional politics at home. Consequently, and not surprisingly, there was throughout this time much talk about the rise of the rest, about the Asian century, and about America being left behind. If the 20th century was the American century, the reasoning went, the 21st century would belong to others. In fact, the conventional wisdom is wrong. At present, the United States is better positioned than any other great power for the next 20 or 30 years, or perhaps longer. Moreover, this advantageous position is inseparably linked to our 2 largest neighbors and our 2 largest trading partners, Canada to our north and Mexico, of course, to our south. Together, the 3 countries of North America enjoy interlocking and mutually reinforcing sources of competitive advantage in geopolitics and demographics, in energy and natural resources, in manufacturing and industrial competitiveness, and in innovation and technologies. Some of these sources of strength are long-standing and stable. Others are poised for revolutionary growth, as I will explain. And it's for all of these reasons together that we are now on the threshold of the North American decades. Let me explain a bit further. In the 19th century, America's distance from the intrigues and battlegrounds of Europe provided unparalleled security, allowing the U.S. to build up its national strength free from entanglement in the geopolitical contest that consumed the continental European powers. During the first half of the 20th century, our geographic position meant that we didn't suffer the devastation of the 2 world wars that flattened much of the rest of the world. However, the conventional wisdom has held that since 1945, our geography no longer mattered, as we have been in an age of intercontinental ballistic missiles since the onset of the Cold War, and we then entered the age of terrorism and cyber warfare during the post-9/11 era. In fact, however, geography does still matter, and the United States is blessed by its geographic position in having 2 stable, democratic, and increasingly prosperous neighbors with whom we share both values and interests, and now 20 years of free trade since the implementation of the North American Free Trade Act. In fact, North America is also a zone of win-win geopolitics. Now contrast this situation with China's backyard, or India's, or Europe's, or for that matter, yours. In most regions of the world, in fact, strong countries foster unease among their neighbors, which in turn seek to balance against them by turning to other great powers for support. But we don't see Mexico asking Beijing to pivot to Central America, and Canada is, of course, not only not asking others to help balance the United States, it is joined with us in the most enduring alliance in history, that being NATO. The three countries of North America also enjoy, to varying degrees, comparatively shared values: competitive market economies, democracy, rule of law, and cultural compatibility. There are no deep civilizational fault lines among the three countries. And there's a remarkable absence of historical grievances or territorial disputes, especially in view of the 19th century conflicts between the United States and its neighbors. Our geography also feeds into our demographic strength. Together, all three countries approaching 500 million people, multicultural societies that speak global languages like English, Spanish, and French, and are attractive and open to immigration. Also, as most other great powers, including China, Japan, and many European countries, grow older, with aging populations, North America collectively will stay younger. The North American economy is, as I mentioned earlier, already highly integrated thanks to the North American Free Trade Act, with the US, Canada, and Mexico enjoying complementary strengths. We also enjoy the benefit of reasonably developed continental architecture in highways, pipelines, railroads, and so forth, though clearly more infrastructure needs to be added to capitalize on the opportunities that I'll explain in a moment. Indeed, among the key initiatives needed are those that would strengthen, improve, and expand this infrastructure in order to facilitate more trade and movement of goods. Now, the foundation of the North American Decades thesis is the ongoing, really just beginning, energy revolution. This revolution is a result of American innovation that allows directional drilling deep under the surface of the earth and then hydraulic fracturing of deep shale deposits that contain massive quantities of oil and natural gas, the precise location of which has been identified through advances in seismic technology. The changes that have resulted are already extraordinary, and they will become even more so in the years ahead. The United States recently took over as the world's leading producer of natural gas, and we have at least 100 years of natural gas reserves at current production levels, with more being found every day. Meanwhile, it's projected that the United States likely will be the world's leading oil producer as well by 2020. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, in fact, U.S. crude oil production is forecast to reach 9.5 billion just by 2016, approaching the historical high achieved back in 1970 of 9.6 million barrels per day. And this level, current level, is up 1 million barrels per day just in the last year alone. This situation has obviously dramatically changed from that as recent as, say, 2008 or 2009, when many experts assessed that American oil production had peaked and was in steady decline. Peak oil was the term used at that time. It could not have been more wrong. In 2013, with the U.S. energy revolution just underway, the U.S. imported 37% of its oil supplies. That number will fall to 25%, or more likely less, by 2016, with important concomitant reductions in America's current account deficit, or its trade deficit. Meanwhile, U.S. natural gas prices have fallen by well over 50% in the past 5 years. Today, 1 million British thermal units of natural gas in the U.S. costs somewhere around $4.50 to $5, up really just because of the cold weather right now and likely to go back somewhat. But even that, compared with prices in Asia and Europe, are 2 to 4 times as much. This gives industries such as petrochemical production that use natural gas as a raw material, and industries such as cloud computing that use large amounts of inexpensive electricity, a huge comparative advantage over their competitors elsewhere in the world. The United States energy revolution is far from the whole story, however. It's not just in the U.S. In Mexico, President Enrique Peña Nieto is moving forward with an historic energy sector reform program, and I got to spend an hour with him 2 weeks ago discussing it and many of his other initiatives. Though much work still has to be done on implementing legislation, it is clear that state-owned oil giant Pemex will finally surrender its monopoly and allow production-sharing contracts, and thereby likely reverse years of declining oil production. Long lead times for exploration and development of deepwater offshore acreage suggest that large production increases will take time, but the dramatic Mexican reforms are welcome and indeed very heartening news. The energy boom also extends to Canada. There, our #1 trading partner continues to increase production as it also seeks to diversify its market outlets for oil and gas exports, though it clearly will continue to export the majority of its energy resources to the U.S., with whom it has some 6 or more pipelines. Beyond that, after considerable delay, it is likely this year that the administration in the U.S. will approve the Keystone XL pipeline, providing a useful export route for Canadian oil from the sand to go to southern U.S. refining markets. The cumulative effect of all of this, of the developments in gas and oil production in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, will be a continent, North America, that has much greater energy independence and perhaps approaches energy self-sufficiency. In sum, the U.S. is well on its way to being an energy superpower, with energy supplies no longer considered limited, foreign, or finite. This revolution has the potential to re-energize the heretofore sluggish recovery and propel the American economy forward over the coming decades. As a geopolitical matter, of course, increased domestic energy production means less dependency on the Middle East and Latin America, and less potential price shocks from political disputes or other sources of instability. But let me hasten to add here that the United States continues to see the free flow of energy resources from the Gulf region as a vital national interest, because the oil and gas from the countries of this area still fuel our trading partners and will for the foreseeable future. And let me assure you that even if North America becomes truly self-sufficient in energy terms, the U.S. will retain that vital interest in the free flow of energy from the Gulf. But the story of the North American decades is not just founded on the energy revolution, though that may be the most important element in it. We're also on the threshold of several other revolutions in which the U.S. is also the leader or among the leaders. The revolutions in manufacturing, information technology, and the life sciences. The manufacturing revolution, the advent of so-called advanced manufacturing, encompasses advances in robotics, three-dimensional printing, and other breakthroughs in automation. All of them the integration of cutting-edge technologies into production processes. This has required a degree of flexibility, innovation, and access to these technologies, all of which are decisive U.S. advantages vis-à-vis most manufacturing competitors in, for example, Asia. And now the narrowing gap in labor costs between North America, especially Mexico, and the developing world, for example, China, where labor costs have gone up by over 10% each year for the past decade, that narrowing gap in labor costs is resulting in a return of some manufacturing to the U.S. and, more importantly, a substantial growth of manufacturing in Mexico, from which, of course, goods can be exported to the world's largest market by ground rather than by sea or air, as is the case from other parts of the world. Advanced manufacturing will make possible much greater customization of production and decentralization from big plant processes of the past. This reality also favors the U.S. with its relative emphasis on the individual and decentralization as opposed to the emphasis on mass production and scale in many of the developing world manufacturing competitors. Major yet to be realized breakthroughs in advanced manufacturing are still to come. In particular, those centered on advanced material design, which relies on cutting-edge research and technological capacity where, once again, the U.S. has an advantage over its competitors. Again, the combination of U.S. advantages in technology, low-cost energy, and innovation, together with Mexico's lower cost of labor, is making the North American bloc more economically competitive as labor costs rise elsewhere. This is especially true vis-à-vis Germany, as another example where labor and energy costs are unlikely to be reduced given domestic political pressures and social norms. Now, the American innovative spirit is in many respects the envy of the world. People come to the United States from abroad to learn, to create, and to do. And this has enabled the information technology revolution in particular, and that has in turn made the other revolutions possible. The U.S. is furthermore fortunate to have many of the world's best academic institutions, and we have a market structure that promotes and rewards innovation. Indeed, the United States is the market maker for products, and the buying power of our consumers and companies make us a market in which all aspire to participate. Technology has long been a major driver of North American growth, albeit in fits and starts at times, and we're now in the midst of another period of numerous important advances. The boom of the 1990s was indicative of the potential for the future role of technology across our society, deeply interwoven into our day-to-day lives, improving functions and processes we did not previously think could be improved by technology. Some of the major developments: increased connectivity, abundant development of increasingly cheap sensors, improvement in the algorithmic tools that enable analysis of the data generated by such sensors, and the advent of scalable and distributed cloud computing lead us to believe that technological integration into all aspects of our lives is closer than we ever imagined. We are indeed on the threshold of the Internet of Things, as it has been termed. The United States remains the leader in the development of this technology, and we're the envy of the world for the products and the innovations that have made them. It could not be more clearly illustrated than by how much money China spends trying to steal our intellectual capital. Now, innovation in other fields, such as life sciences, the final revolution I want to highlight briefly, while more nascent and more difficult to quantify easily, show enormous promise in areas such as stem cell technology, new vaccines, synthetic biology, and so forth. Here again, there are important breakthroughs on the horizon. In sum, the impact of technological innovation stretches across existing industries, with technology disrupting, supplanting, and enabling the growth of companies, with products such as automated vehicles and smart grid already coming into use. Now, while the U.S., together with Canada and Mexico, is poised on the brink of the North American decades, policy choices in Washington, Ottawa, and Mexico City will play a significant role in determining to what extent the opportunities are seized, to what extent we capitalize on the potential posed by the four revolutions I have identified. There are, in short, some major risk factors, including political dysfunction and paralysis in the United States, where we need legislation on comprehensive immigration reform, smart investments in infrastructure that enables further economic development, education reform, continued examination of government spending to ensure that our budget deficit continues to reduce as a percentage of GDP, as has been the case most recently, reform of some of our taxation policies, and further harmonization of regulations governing trade between the three countries of North America and indeed of the world. Beyond the U.S., of course, Mexico holds enormous potential given the unprecedented number of constitutional reforms achieved by President Peña Nieto and his government. But clearly, the rule of law challenges in Mexico loom significant, as do challenges in the institutional capacity to implement the many reforms that have been approved. But the situation there is certainly much more hopeful than not right now. Some will argue that the coming North American decades should be seized as an opportunity for the U.S. to withdraw from the world. That would be exactly wrong. Indeed, that is the final risk factor that could threaten us. North America's security and prosperity remain embedded in a broader international system that fostered and upheld by the U.S. over the past 60-plus years. In the absence of U.S. leadership and engagement, that system would not be able to sustain itself. Thus, what the North American Decades thesis does not mean is that the U.S. can afford to disengage from the challenges of the Middle East, Asia, Pacific, Africa, or Europe. To the contrary, what it means is that the argument heard so often in recent years that we can no longer afford to play a global leadership role and that others will be better positioned and resourced to do so is fundamentally mistaken. In fact, we're entering an era in which we should be confident about our capacity to do what we have done before at our best, albeit confident in a thoughtful and pragmatic way, to translate our position of extraordinary power and unique advantage to work with others, like this great country, to help shape the international order for the better. The question really is only whether we summon the imagination and political will to do so. And you should know that I believe that we will indeed do just that, as we work with our partners and friends here in the UAE and the Gulf region and elsewhere around the world. So let me end the way I started, by thanking you for the honor of speaking here before this important center as it celebrates its 20th anniversary. In a country and an emirate that have been on my mind and in my heart continuously since the days that I was privileged to serve in uniform in this region. Indeed, the people of the UAE and Abu Dhabi have earned enormous respect throughout the world for their extraordinary achievements and accomplishments in recent decades in particular. I will always treasure the partnerships and friendships I enjoyed here in the past, even as I build on them in future important joint endeavors like the exchange we're having this evening. So again, Mabruk, congratulations on all that you have done. You have appropriately, you have earned the envy of the world, and that includes the envy of your American friends, the pride of your American friends, who are building and trying to make the most of the opportunities made possible by the coming North American decades. Shukran jazilan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General David Petraeus, for this valuable speech, which you addressed many current issues, and you also mentioned your thoughts about the North America next decade. Now, before I move to open the floor for discussion, I only want to ask one question. The question is, what do you think is the future of the UAE military presence in the Arabian Gulf region, based on your experience that you spent it here in the area, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, thank you very much. I think the future of the UAE is extraordinary, frankly. I think it is exceedingly bright. I think, as I said, what you have achieved in recent decades in particular is breathtaking. I first came here back in 1989 or 1990. I mean, the Corniche is not even in the same place anymore, nor is anything else, for that matter. But it's not just the skyline that has changed. It is the country. It is the intellectual growth. It's the investment you've made in education. And indeed, linking Abu Dhabi and Dubai and the other Emirates with many of the leading U.S. universities is an extraordinary and a very important initiative. Your military has grown dramatically. As I mentioned, behind closed door, you have a spectacular Air Force. You have superb Special Operations Forces. You have excellent general purpose forces. Are they small? Sure. This is a small country at the end of the day, but it is one that punches way, way above its weight class, as we say. It has influence that is disproportionately large relative to its size. And that is a tribute as well to the quality of your leaders, with many of whom I've had extensive relationships and meetings. Mohammed bin Zayed, your Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, foremost among them, and to the quality of your diplomats. And I mentioned Ambassador Yusuf Al-Otaiba, who was actually selected as the best ambassador in Washington in a recent poll. You know, we have polls on everything back in the United States, including the best international representatives, and he is truly a standout in that regard. I should note that, you know, you mentioned that I received decorations from a number of countries, and I felt very privileged to have been decorated by this country, whose military forces were actually under my command. And what they did in Afghanistan was very, very impressive, in real fights, in real tough parts of the country, and did not shrink from being in Helmand province, the center of some of the most difficult challenges from the Taliban. So again, across the board, I think what you have done and your commitment to the arts and your commitment to Formula One racing, for goodness sake, whatever it may be, the UAE has really been a beacon, I think, of excellence, and it has embraced excellence in every respect, and it has invested very, very wisely, I think, along the years. And you are now seeing the dividends, the results of this investment. Now, having said all that, the UAE is in a tough neighborhood. It's got difficult neighbors in many different directions. Some are still grappling with the after effects of the Arab Spring. The UAE has sought to help a number of those countries. It obviously looks across the Gulf at a country which has been embarked on a nuclear program that has caused enormous concern around the world and has violated UN Security Council resolutions again and again, has supported a variety of nefarious activities in various places. So again, it's going to take this great skill to continue to navigate these very turbulent waters in this region, and to continue to take its place in the world. But I'm very confident in the leadership of this great country. Warren Buffett, the American multi-billionaire, I guess the best investor in the world or something like that, has always said that you invest in leadership. And the truth is that this is a country that has great leadership, and that is also why so many businesses are invested here, And indeed, my KKR colleague, Kaveh Sami, is here as well tonight, yet another indicator of the importance of this country. And just one final note, when I was the commander of U.S. Central Command, I looked at the size of the relationship that we had when it came to security, basically arms sales, all the work that the UAE was doing in that area, the tremendous Gulf Air Warfare Training Center, the best center other than perhaps the one at Nellis Air Force Base in the desert, the southwest desert of the United States. And I said, we can't just have a colonel here as the senior defense representative. We need a two-star general, and we got one. Secretary Gates sent an Air Force two-star out here, befitting a country that has invested so much in high technology aviation. And again, what's going on here is at times absolutely breathtaking and hugely impressive, and I think the future is very, very bright.
Thank you, General David Petraeus. Now I will open the floor for the questions. And I want to ask the audience who want to ask a question to stand up, introduce himself, and then make his question short as possible as can. We will take Abdul Rada Asiri. You came from Kuwait.
Another great partner.
Thank you, Zair. I would add congratulations for the center for the 20th birthday anniversary. Well, frankly speaking, we enjoyed your journey about North American decade, and being a man who wore the civilian and the military uniform at certain time, and now being an academician, a more independent and analytical-minded individual. Certainly, we are interested in North America, but I'm sure all this audience are more interested on the Gulf and in the Middle East. Being an independent individual, what is your assessment, your reading of United States policy vis-a-vis issues are so germane and so important for this part of the world? Terrorism, radicalism, nuclear issue, the agreement between the United States and P+1 and Iran. These I'm sure the audience are expecting some elaboration from you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thanks for a very simple opening question. And let me just say, by the way, that I was also privileged to serve over the years in Kuwait on several different occasions. And I have enormous admiration for what your country has done. I know that its parliament is sometimes a little bit sporty, shall we say, animated, but we watch that with admiration as well as we see the extraordinary development that has taken place in that country and the way, frankly, that it came back from the devastation that it suffered during the Iraqi occupation. And again, I was privileged to serve with many Kuwaiti officers, diplomats, even occasional intelligence folks, and they are all top-notch, and you're to be congratulated on that. I guess that perhaps sort of in a macro way, in discussing American policy in the region and perhaps even in the world, would be to acknowledge, I think, that when a country has gone through two very difficult, very long, very painful wars, one of which is still going on, of course, our involvement in Afghanistan, and a number of countries represented here have soldiers there, including two of the ambassadors that I recognized, or three of the ambassadors that I recognized earlier. When you go through something like that, I think, understandably, it is just inescapable that the country's leaders and citizens will be very wary of additional military engagements, particularly any that might engage the country for a long time on the ground in another country. And again, I think that's just, it's a fact, it's understandable, and it does cause a a certain searching and serious examination of any case in which the use of force will be entertained. That has not, however, stopped us from carrying out a variety of different operations, not just the continuation of the operations in Afghanistan, but I mean in the last week alone. All of this is public knowledge. I'm not relying on any secret sources in anything that I say this evening. But in the last week alone, there reportedly was a drone strike against a very senior al-Shabaab figure in Somalia. There was one against an al-Qaeda figure in Yemen, where there's also quite a substantial support for President Hadi in a comprehensive way, but without lots of U.S. boots on the ground, certainly. Same in Somalia, a very small presence, if you will, that supports the development of the Somali government and has watched and, in some cases, supported the pushing back of the al-Shabaab forces. And one also reported, again, in the press in Pakistan. We played a significant role in the operation to liberate Libya from Gaddafi. Although it's said that the U.S. led from behind, the truth is that some 60 to 70% of all sorties flown were American, and we even loaned bombs and a variety of other munitions to countries that were engaged that ran out of them during the course of the war. We've supported the French in their very admirable operation in Mali. We're heavily engaged in the destruction of the chemical weapons that will come out of Syria and so forth, acknowledging that the route to that particular agreement in the end was a bit circuitous, as I think leaders in the U.S. would freely acknowledge. I think that President Obama has tried to be very clear to distinguish between the case in Syria and the absolute determination to ensure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. He stated that repeatedly over the years and very clearly articulated that during the UN General Assembly speech this past fall, where again he went to considerable length to establish that that is very different from anything else that we have contemplated doing or have done in the region. We have sought to support Iraq in a variety of different ways, as sadly we have seen that country spiral downward back into truly tragic levels of violence that are reminiscent of those that existed in 2006, 2007, when we launched the surge in Iraq that ultimately did, as we heard earlier, reduce the level of violence by over 90% and enabled the transition of all security tasks and other activities to Iraqi authorities at a time when the conditions were quite good. It has been very sad to see the devolution of the deterioration of the security situation in Iraq, a result in many cases of governmental activities that have reawakened the kinds of suspicions, fears, and so forth in certain elements of the population that we'd worked hard during the surge to get back into, to become a part of the fabric of Iraqi society once again, and to feel that there was an incentive to support the new Iraq rather than to oppose it. So I think you have to be very careful not to misinterpret American reserve, if you will, or again, greater analysis of potential engagements for lack of resolve to ensure the vital interests of the United States, which in this region are very, very clear. Prevention of Iran having a nuclear weapon, ensuring the free flow of energy resources to the world, which again is our trading partners, or represents all of our trading partners, and that is why even if we actually do achieve energy self-sufficiency as a continent of North America, which may actually be possible with the reform of the Mexican energy industry in particular, and the further developments in the U.S. energy industry, even if that were to happen, we would still absolutely see free flow of energy out through the Gulf, and then also, by the way, around the Bab el-Mandeb and the Suez Canal, as well as the routes to the West, as being in the vital national interest of the United States. It is trite to talk about the way that the economies of the world have grown together, the interconnections and so forth, but that's a fact, and it is something that we want to actually increase. And by the way, although I've mentioned in some cases some activities that have caused us concern in the part of China, we absolutely want to pursue a constructive relationship with them. We want a productive and growing and strengthening trade, economic exchange, indeed educational exchanges, intellectual sharing, and all the rest of that.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, please. Here.
Thank you. Good evening, General Petraeus. My name is Stephen, and I'm a student at New York University, Abu Dhabi here, studying political science.
Did you say New York University?
New York University here in Abu Dhabi, yes.
And is there one here and Dubai, or did I misstate earlier?
You misstated earlier.
Oh, my apologies to Abu Dhabi. I meant to say Abu Dhabi, not Dubai. Okay.
Okay.
That's cleared up.
Glad to have helped that. My question is surrounding the current scandals with the NSA. A short time ago, Boeing lost a rather large contract for some fighter jets with Brazil due to the spying on the Brazilian president. And here in the UAE recently, there was a pair of satellites that were going to be purchased from France, that the sale was at least put on hold due to American-made components that were designed to surreptitiously send data back to the US. Moreover, we've seen pushback from Germany and other states due to the surveillance by the US government. Additionally, we're seeing a pushback against American tech companies as it's found that there have been back doors built in by the US government to access data. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the surveillance program and how that would incorporate into your thesis of the coming North American decades.
Well, first of all, what Snowden has revealed is obviously done enormous damage to some specific programs and also to U.S. relationships with a number of countries around the world. And there's a keen recognition of that. And I think the President's speech on this topic last week reflected that concern and acknowledged that in some cases there needs to be some rebuilding of trust. There need to be reassurances. There need to be steps taken, not just for the American people, but for the people of the world, and that it's important for our industries. I talked about the IT industry. We lead the world in the IT industry, and there could be penalties for some American headquartered firms if those assurances are not adequate. I think there's clear recognition of that, and there's every intention to follow through with that. You know, having said all this, I don't think it should be a surprise that intelligence agencies actually do try to gather intelligence and do try to, I mean, you know, CIA's job is to steal secrets, chase bad guys. I mean, let's be honest about this. Having said that, there clearly have to be boundaries. There clearly have to be left and right limits on the road, and they are there. And I think that there will be some refinement of those. There will be some changes in procedures and so forth, so that, again, there can be the reassurances that both enable the trust that is the foundation of good relationships around the world and is also a foundation for the conduct of business around the world as well. I think that's the reality of this situation. But I'll end the way I started by saying that he has done enormous damage. It's probably the single biggest blow to U.S. intelligence operations in certainly in the history of those organizations.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Riyadh.
Thank you, sir. Riyadh Kahwaji, I'm the CEO of the Institute for Near East and Gulf Military Analysis, also known as Enigma. We work a lot in the defense and security sector, and there are a couple of questions here. First, we have seen a clear difference in strategies and objectives between the US and the GCC on various issues. We've seen differences on Bahrain, on Egypt, on the Iran nuclear, and the Iran nuclear surprise deal kind of poisoned the situation or the relations, plus what's happening in Syria and the clear differences in objectives and approaches to various files here. How much do you think this will affect the overall relations between the two, and what should each side do to mend these relations? And the second follow-up question is on the industrial side. We've seen an increased interest in the industry in the region here to partner, do joint venture in transfer technology, especially in IT, in defense, and aviation. And there's been a lot of obstacles due to the export controls, the strict export controls from the US side. How do you think this should, what do you think should be done over here to encourage the creations of such businesses, more investments from here into business in the US in research and development, and in creating job opportunities back here with transfer technology? Thank you.
Well, those are some more great questions. And congratulations on the work that Enigma has done, by the way. There have been some differences in approach on some of the issues you discussed. There have been some points of convergence as well. I think in some cases the differences have been more of a rhetorical nature, candidly, than they have been in fact. And I might put Bahrain in that category. Perhaps even now, over time, the evolution with respect to Egypt. Others, I think, were absolutely, I think the issue with Iran, and I did have this expressed, I was out here about a month and a half or 2 months ago, shortly after the interim agreement was announced, and I think the issue there, frankly, was just perhaps a lack of sufficient advanced discussion before the agreement was announced. And I don't know if I should look at Michael on this, and I think that's roughly what it was. I don't think that anyone out here would prefer that we bomb Iran or that there is conflict. I mean, I think everybody recognizes that the consequences, which are very difficult to predict in the wake of a strike by any country on Iran's nuclear program, those consequences could be significant for the entire Gulf region, not just for whatever country it is that initiates that action. So I think, and we were discussing this earlier, clearly the objective should be to try to achieve a diplomatic resolution of the issue of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. But this is not about trust. This is about verification. This is about, as President Obama has explained, going in with eyes wide open, very realistic perspective. And even then, he has said that the chances are perhaps 50-50 or less. So he's not looking at this through rose-tinted glasses, as they say. Some, I think, again, of this has evolved as the Arab Spring has gone on. And I think the key, you asked what can be done. Well, what can be done is frankly, continuing and intensifying conversations, between diplomats, between leaders, between academic groups like this center, where this center does a marvelous job of fostering dialogue and I think understanding, even in some cases when that understanding is that there are slight differences of opinion and approach. So I think that would be the approach necessary there. With respect to technology companies and industries and so forth, as I mentioned earlier, the UAE has been brilliant at investing in a variety of different endeavors, and these are certainly among them. In fact, I think we were mentioning beforehand that the largest ever purchase of Boeing aircraft was announced at the Dubai Air Show just a couple of months ago. That will have the latest in civilian technology. It's fully transferred and so forth. The fact is that the UAE has the most advanced F-16 fighter in the world. It's a Block 60. The United States doesn't have it. We have the Block 50. Yes, we have a stealth fighter that has, in some respects, more advanced technology, and we're working on yet another one. And I think the key there is that we continue to work particularly closely in these areas so that there can be the strengthening of the trust, the strengthening of the confidence that the most advanced cutting-edge technology can be safely transferred and safeguarded. I have always held that confidence in partners in this country. I mentioned how closely I worked in the past with your leaders. I recommended strongly when I was the commander of Central Command the transfer of certain key items, some of which now have been, some in the ballistic missile defense arena, a variety in unmanned aerial vehicles. There's a whole host of different arms sales that have been consummated that represent that trust and confidence, and I'm sure the embassy would be happy to provide a list to you and perhaps a list of what's still for sale if you'd like to see that as well. But I think, again, two great questions, and I thank you for that.
Yes, I will come to you later, but let's take a question from the middle, yes.
General Petraeus, welcome. We're very glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Jack Borders. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the first hospital in this country, Oasis Hospital. But I want to ask you a question. It's actually sort of a follow-on from the last one. Do you think that the underpinning of this North American strength, both domestically and internationally, is best served with a buildup or a shrinkage of the military machine? And I would ask you to address that not just from a United States standpoint, but also considering the amount of money that's sent abroad from North America for military buildup.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, look, when you gradually bring to an end a country's involvement in two huge wars remember that at the height of the surge, for example, when I was the commander, we had 165,000 Americans on the ground in Iraq, and another probably 10 or 20,000 coalition forces and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi forces in Afghanistan at the peak. Again, when I was privileged to command, we had about 100,000 U.S. Those are big, big numbers. And think about, to sustain that level, you have to have a similar number back in the States that is preparing to go, and then a similar number that has just gotten back and is recovering, and then, of course, much, much more because you're also engaged elsewhere in the world. So as you draw down those kinds of major commitments and involvements, clearly you can reduce forces. The fact is that the defense budget of the United States is being reduced. I think there's general acceptance of that. You can argue about certain issues at the margin. You can certainly argue that sequestration is not the way to go about it. It's not the most logical method of that. But the fact is that even after these reductions, the U.S. will spend more than somewhere around the next 10 to 14, depending on your math, altogether that it spends more than those next 10 or 14 altogether. So the comparison between, for example, the U.S. Navy and all the rest of the world's navies, not just any other navy, or the U.S. Air Force, and again, you take them all, is not a contest. And the same, frankly, about ground forces, Marines, and so forth and so on. So I think at a time when you do want to reduce government deficits, and as I emphasize, you want them to continue to come down as a percentage of GDP, which is the situation in the United States right now, both as a result of some budget cutting and as a result of the economy recovering. And we're now down to 6.7% unemployment, still need to pick up greater growth, and the estimates are probably somewhere around 3% this year, which will be yet another notch or two up from where we were this past year. So I think, again, that these reductions can be made. I can assure you they do not cut into the capability to carry out the contingencies envisioned for the Gulf region. I was, after all, the commander of U.S. Central Command. I know what those contingencies are. We either developed or refined them on my watch, and we have more than adequate capabilities for those missions. So beyond that, again, I think it is appropriate and prudent to keep that deficit coming down as a percent of GDP so that it doesn't stifle growth in the long run. If the government has to continue to borrow money from various sources, obviously it's competing with businesses that could be using that money for other purposes. And hearteningly, again, we see a pretty good projection, although there are some entitlement programs in a few years out that, if not tackled, will cause that to go back up again, and that would be obviously would be an adverse development.
Thank you, General. We will take a question from the lady now. We'll give a chance for the female.
Good evening, General, and thank you for an outstanding presentation. I have a very direct question.
Can you introduce yourself
Yes,
first?
sorry.
Yes.
My name is Dania Khatib, and I'm finishing up my PhD at Exeter University in Political Science.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have my viva soon, so wish me luck.
I will, I do.
Thank you. You said twice in the course of your presentation that the U.S. remains very committed to the Gulf and to the Middle East. We've seen that in Libya, where you went along with your allies and you bombed Gaddafi and you liberated the people. Where in Syria, you're taking a very hands-off approach, while Iran is taking a very hands-on approach, and it's part of the conflict. It's directly contributing to the conflict and tipping the balance to the favor of Assad regime. Are we back to the Nixon doctrine, where Iran is seen as a surrogate fortress for the U.S., is the U.S. surrogate fortress? Are we back to the Nixon doctrine, where Iran is giving an influential role in the region? Because I find it a bit strange that you take such a hands-off approach from Syria while you're very hands-on in other parts of the Middle East. And Syria is very vital.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm actually not familiar with the case you're referring to there with President Nixon, but be that as it may. And by the way, I think at Exeter that you have a retired three-star UK general who's a professor now, who wrote the counterinsurgency field manual, by the way, for the UK, and was a great partner of ours during the surge in Iraq when he headed the reconciliation cell, which is a particularly important component of our strategy, and I'd appreciate you giving him my best. In fact, I may come and lecture there at some point in the next few months. With respect to Syria, I don't think this is a case of wanting to see Iran have a free hand anywhere. I think you will have read in the newspapers recently, and again, I can't obviously comment on anything from my former lives, But a recent story in the last 24 or 48 hours talked about how the United States is indeed apparently providing arms and ammunition and funding and so forth to the opposition in the South. Again, that's according to the newspaper. I think, as it says, based on an assurance that there's a sense that that will get into the right hands rather than into the wrong hands. Beyond that, the U.S. has certainly far and away led in terms of contributing to the humanitarian assistance missions and to some others. I will, on this particular question though, I think I might defer to the U.S. government on the actual policy itself. There is obviously an effort to try to achieve some kind of diplomatic resolution, although it's difficult if the situation on the ground is one that is a stalemate, or indeed perhaps one in which Bashar al-Assad and his Lebanese Hezbollah and Quds Force supporters have indeed achieved a shift in the momentum in battles, say in Al-Qaysar and Homs and Aleppo and some other places, but certainly not able to be able to reassert control of the entire country. In fact, I think one of the concerns clearly is that the country could fragment or fracture, and that in some respects it has into de facto 3 or more different pieces that controlled by the regime, Bashar al-Assad regime, from Damascus up to Homs, out to the coast and up. The areas of the north and south and east controlled by the opposition, and then even the Kurdish areas that have declared themselves to be autonomous now as well. And I think that's a huge concern. I learned, though, as an infantry officer, that occasionally you go around a minefield rather than through it, and that's what I'm going to choose to do, actually, rather than go further into the U.S. policy.
I see one person at the back. Can you stand, please? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, good evening, sir. First of all, I would like to...
what's your name? Please?
Yeah, my name is Mustafa Ahmad.
I'm from where?
I'm from Cameroon. I'm a security guard working in Al Groom Resort. Yeah, I would like to thank General David Petraeus for his wonderful presentation and for this elaborate and enlightening discussion. And I wish to salute and recognize the effort that the U.S. has been playing all around the world in ensuring that the world is at peace. But I have one question for you, Mr. Chairman. Don't you think it's the high time for U.S. to change their policy around the world of fighting terrorism, radicalism, through investing in quality education, rather than by war that has no end? Because I don't think war is the right way of solving and maintaining world peace, because investing in quality education will enable people not to be brainwashed and not to embrace the radical forces all around the world. Don't you think it's high time for America to change their approach through war by investing in quality education? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Mustafa, thanks for your kind words. And let me just say that I think there's no question that quality education, quality communication strategies, and so forth are absolutely central to any effort to combat the kinds of extremist thinking that leads to extremist actions, to terrorism. Having said that, I think there is also certainly a role for the use of military force in combating elements that have shown themselves to be extremist, to combat elements that carry out such, heinous acts as, say, the attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11 and the Pentagon and so forth. So I think the truth is that you need, in this area, as you do in almost every particular endeavor in life, you need a comprehensive strategy. And that strategy, by necessity, I think, has to include the use of military capabilities. It must include the attention to education. I've had this conversation with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed. There's an enormous investment here in this country in the kinds of education that is designed to combat that. I will say that, I was keenly aware of that when I was the commander of the surge in Iraq. In fact, there was a period during which we stopped the release of detainees from our detention facilities because there was no program of education. There was not a rehabilitation component before we released individuals back to their villages and their tribes. And we realized that what we were doing in some cases was allowing extremists in the general detention population to radicalize the others and also to prevent the establishment of successful rehabilitation programs. It came down again to education, but it wasn't just education and citizenship courses and so forth. It was also helping to impart a skill. We actually built, believe it or not, we bought our own bread factory. We bought brick-making factories. We bought art studios. We bought all number and type of different facilities that could be used to help the detainees learn a useful skill that they could use to make a living when they return to their tribes and to their communities, rather than having to return to a life of extremist activity, insurgent activity, or criminal activity. So I strongly agree with the argument that you make. I do believe that there is a huge emphasis on it in the United States. Again, the ambassador could probably give us chapter and verse on the billions of dollars that are spent around the world by the U.S. Agency for International Development and a variety of State Department and other departments' programs. I think you would be astonished at how significant they are in many of the countries around the world. But having said that, there's no question but that more would be not only desirable but advisable. And so again, I strongly support what it is you're saying.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. And my name is Ahmed Yusuf Muhammad. I am Sudanese ambassador to UAE. I would like first to congratulate the center for the 20th anniversary. This is anniversary, and I would like to congratulate the center as well as the leader of the center, Dr. Sanad. I congratulate you for your continuous initiatives. I would like to welcome you, General Petraeus, for this presentation. This is an excellent, beautiful presentation. We have listened to it carefully. I would like to also agree with my colleague from Kuwait that we cannot avoid not to talk about our issues in this area. So the presentation you have made is an excellent presentation. I start my career in the US. I get married there since at the time you are the director of the CIA. So I love your country as well as I love my kids. I would like to have just a question with regard to to my area. The problem in the South Sudan, the newborn South Sudan is raising. The killing is also raising every minute. We in the region, the GAD countries are doing our best to stop this fight. We in the Sudan have sacrificed third of our land and 90% of our resources. Now the resources have stopped, the flow of oil have stopped. Refugees are coming back to Sudan. The fighting is still continue. The US has invested heavily in this area, and still things are not going on very well. I would like to see, how do you see the future of this newborn country? Thanks.
Well, the U.S., as you know, Ambassador, and thanks very much for your kind words about the United States. The U.S. has invested a great deal in, as you well know, in the creation of South Sudan, the world's newest country still, and a country with tremendous energy blessings that was split off from Sudan, and then first the lack of agreement, and now the violence has prevented the flow of that oil to export markets, and therefore deprived Sudan of its portion of the fees for the transportation and so forth through your country. We're very, very concerned about the resumption of violence in the South. Actually, it's been heartening that the violence between Sudan and South Sudan was reduced in the last year or two, and now you have violence within South Sudan spilling over the border once again in the area of the oil production and causing a huge impact in that regard. I think you've seen the U.S. has been quite heavily invested in this effort. It has both individually and then collectively sought to encourage and to promote and to enable the dialogue between the elements that are in conflict. It has a degree of influence there. I think it is exercising it. There have been some glimmers of hope in recent days, but I can assure you that especially because the United States and indeed this administration invested so much in the establishment of South Sudan that it is investing now greatly in the maintenance or the reestablishment of peace in South Sudan and again reconciliation between these two overall groupings that have disrupted such an important economic function and really threatened the very livelihoods of those in South Sudan in particular.
I will give the last chance for Dr. Ibtisam. She will be the last person who asks.
In Arabic they say ختامه مسك.
In Arabic we say that the conclusion will be odorous and perfumed. Now she speaks in English.
It's a very simple question, but it seems it's vague in the region. What is the U.S. strategy? I've just came from D.C. and it seems, and I asked everybody, and they're saying there is no strategy. The second one is they're saying no better friend more than your enemy, which is applicable to your intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan, who actually benefited from it, Iran, and also now non-engagement in Syria also benefiting Iran. So if I'm going to ask you, what is the lessons learned from Iraq, from intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan? Thank you.
Well, I mean, look, there have been levels at lessons at every single level that have already been learned from Iraq and Afghanistan, and many more that undoubtedly will be learned as scholarly centers like this one and those in the United States and around the world study each of those interventions. I think, of course, a lesson that we relearned is that getting involved on the ground in a country is much easier. It's easier to enter than it is to exit. That counterinsurgency, when you engage in it, is very, very difficult. It's lengthy. It's costly. We learned about the imperative of having a nuanced understanding of the countries you are going to enter, of the political structures, of how government is supposed to work, how it really works, of, you know, literally all the way down to every valley and village and its tribal makeup, its ethnic composition, its religious practices, and so forth and so on. And to really, truly have an understanding of that. I can tell you that one element that helped us a great deal in Iraq during the surge was the fact that many of us had, by the time of the surge, already served in Iraq for at least 1 year, in some cases 2 or more years. In my case, I think I was certainly at about 2.5 years by that point in time. And we'd gained an understanding of Iraq that was, I think, sufficient. I think we did actually succeed in accomplishing the objective we had during the surge and indeed in the years after that until we removed the final combat forces of the United States. Remember that we did keep a substantial security assistance element in Iraq. We still have a 3-star general there, I believe, and now it's probably down under 100, but at one time we had well into the hundreds of U.S. forces that were helping with the introduction of American equipment, training, and so on at their training centers. We learned again that this understanding of regional dynamics is vital, that nation building, if you will, is very, very hard, frustrating, sometimes messy, many times messy. And so again, we certainly took all those lessons. And then as you go down a level or so, I listed one time, you know, what mistakes did we make in Iraq? When I had my confirmation hearing before the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee to go back to Iraq as the commander of the surge and be promoted to 4-star general, I was asked, what mistakes did we make in Iraq to this point? And I think I had 4 pages of them. And so there's no question but that there are lessons. We'd learned lessons by that point in time. There will still be other lessons that we will learn. And again, it is absolutely tragic to see the way the security situation has spiraled downward instead of continuing upward. And the lesson from this, actually, is that the components that made a surge a success, security of the people by living with them, positioning with them, and perhaps above all, promoting and supporting and aiding reconciliation between all the peoples of the country, even as you go after the irreconcilables at an even higher operational tempo, you must do everything you can to bring the people of a country back together if you are to achieve improvement in the security situation. We learned in Afghanistan, again, we knew this when I went in as the commander. I said up front in my confirmation hearing that time that we would not be able to turn the situation. We would not flip Afghanistan the way we did actually flip the situation in Iraq dramatically. When you reduce the level of violence by over 90%, that's pretty dramatic. And you enable the reestablishment of infrastructure, and oil exports go up again, and electricity. The towers are standing up instead of on their side. But in Afghanistan, I said, this is not going to happen. Number one, and we have relearned this lesson, which again, we knew this before. It is very, very difficult to combat insurgent groups that have significant sanctuaries in neighboring countries. And the fact is that the headquarters of the Afghan Taliban is not in Afghanistan. Of course, it's roughly in the area of Quetta in Baluchistan. And the headquarters of the Haqqani Network, another insurgent group, is not in Afghanistan. It is in North Waziristan, in the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan. Again, that was a lesson relearned. We knew that. It doesn't mean that you give up and throw your hands in the air. You just have to work even harder on the kind of interdiction as on the lines that the insurgents use to come into the country and try to get to the capital. So, look, there have been enormous lessons already learned. I'm sure there will be even more. And I think that brings us once again to the importance of organizations like this that foster the kinds of study, of intellectual inquiry, of open analysis that provide for it, which people can get up and ask questions and challenge others in a respectful manner, and where these kinds of lessons can be identified, enumerated, and then hopefully, by the way, because a lesson is actually not learned until it has actually led to a change in a policy, in a campaign plan, in your laws, regulations, procedures, or practices. It's only identified. In fact, we had a process in Iraq, a formal process of identifying lessons that needed to be learned. We had something called the Center for Army Lessons Learned from the U.S. Army. The Marine Corps had one as well. There was a joint one. We had a variety of other organizations in Afghanistan. We had them also. We also had the counterinsurgency advise and assist group with which I would meet monthly and would go through lessons and so forth. And then you learn them when you actually make a change in what it is you're actually doing in the operational documents that direct action. And I am a huge believer that in the kinds of conflicts that we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also supporting in places like Yemen, Somalia, wherever it may be, that the side that learns fastest is the side that usually prevails. And so learning lessons is absolutely vital to progress. And again, it's a reason to celebrate the 20 great years of this center. So with that, let me again say Mabruk and shukran jazilan to all of you. Thank you very much.
And this answer wrap up our event for tonight. I want to thank General David Petraeus for a great speech and presentation, and thanks for all of you for your active interaction. And I hope to see you in our next lectures next week on 3rd of February about Afghanistan after 2014, delivered by Mr. Hikmet Karzai from Afghanistan. Thank you, and good night, and see you.